Today we're going to tell the story of how this 85 350X became this 85 350X. Here we go. So about 5 years ago, I bought this 85 ATC 350X. It was about an hour away, and I think I paid $1,400, maybe $1,450. And the reason I bought it was I wanted to restore one. I wanted to take one down to the frame, powder coat it, go through it. You know, if it didn't need engine work, that would be a plus. And this one popped up, and it seemed like a decent deal. So I went and bought it and brought it home and started the process of tearing it down, and I did a little inspection of it. This machine came with these fenders on it, and as you can see, they're cracked and they're wired together at the rear there. But the guy had also found these fenders to go with it, which were fairly complete. Not perfect by any stretch, but decent, and those were going to be the rear fenders that I would put on it. Here I am just kind of mocking it up just to see what it would look like. The tank was kind of rough but clean on the inside. I noticed when I took this thing for a test drive that the motor was really loud. The exhaust was loud. It's got a DG on it, but at the header I could almost see flames coming out. And this is why. They couldn't even tighten the header down to get a good seal, because the exhaust flange bolts, the threaded portion on the head were not in a good shape. So I knew I was going to have to repair that. Started tearing it down more and more. This is that process. It's kind of fun. I think my friend Doug was over at this particular time to check this out and help me out with it. There's the motor with the header removed. You can see some overspray on it. It seemed like a solid motor for what little I rode it before I started tearing it down. We're about to lose the forks on the front. All the controls are being taken off at this point. Apparently I was eager. You know what I was doing was taking pictures to help me document where things went. In case I couldn't remember, I would have a record of, you know, what cable went where. I could always zoom in on these, and that's always a good process when you're doing a restoration. It probably wouldn't have hurt to actually get more close-ups of the frame and routing of where cables go. A manual is super helpful, but it only gets you so far. So at this point, we're gearing up to pull the motor, trying to figure out and remember which way it comes out, what's the easiest way. And what ended up happening was I took all the engine bolts out and was busy doing something, and my friend Doug just pulled the motor out. And I think he went out to the shifter side when he did it. And I don't have any video of that, but you're going to see that eventually. It's coming up here. I don't know why I felt compelled to take so many pictures at this particular stage, but there it is. Boom. All of a sudden it's out. And now we're going to drop the swing arm out of this thing after we take another picture. Everything was pretty crusty, pretty dirty, but it was complete. It was all there. It was a great candidate to start with the exception of the motor, the head on the motor, and those exhaust flange bolt holes. You couldn't ask for much better. It was a prime candidate. So the swing arm comes out. Used my jack to assist in that process. The plan at this point is to get this down so I can powder coat the frame, powder coat the swing arm. Prior to that, I'm going to have to repair a crack in the frame, the notorious crack that forms just behind the front sprocket in the down tube of the frame. There's an 86 350X that I had partially torn down. That was a project for another day. But at this point, I set up a time where I could go visit my brother-in-law, who is a lot more familiar with the welder than I am. And he was going to tackle mending that tube with the crack in it that I had mentioned. This machine had a Maier front fender that came on it, so I found this OEM fender on eBay that had a crack that I was sure I could repair, so that was going to be part of the fenders. Now these I'd like to talk on just a minute. These are the powders that I selected to use on this project. These are both Columbia coatings. On the left you can see it is Super Mirror Red, and that is the perfect color match to the red frame and the motor mounts, the taillight bracket. Anything you need that is going to be red on this machine should be Super Mirror Red. On the right you can see I picked Argent Silver, which is not the right color. It is way too dark and I do not recommend it. What I do recommend, I'm going to overlay on the screen because I found that out to be a lot better color match to the silver used on Hondas, which is cloud silver for the most part. I had two buddies at the time that were running a powder coating operation out of the one guy's garage, so I teamed up with them. I bought the powder and they charged me $100 to use their sandblast cabinet, and they would powder coat my frame for me. So here we are just kind of staging things. We cooked the frame before we got started just to help crisp up the existing paint that was on the frame and dry up any oils, burn them off before I sandblasted, which is what's going on in this picture. And once I got the frame nice and clean, I think they stuck it back in to heat it back up so it would be nice and warm for when they applied the powder. I don't remember what sort of setup they were using to put the powder on, but it's a very neat process. If you haven't seen it done, you know, you put a charge to the frame and it just draws in that powder. It's just kind of, the gun is just shooting out, you know, clouds of this powder that get attracted to the frame and stick. So pretty neat operation. It goes on pretty bright in appearance, but once you put it in the oven, which this guy made his own oven, pretty neat. Once you put it in there, the color starts to really pop. So this is all pre-cooking the frame. You put little plugs in where all the threaded holes are so you don't get powder in those holes that you have to clean out later. So here it is in the oven, just taking the picture through the window. Very neat process, and just to watch the transformation from that bright light colored powder to this nice deep red. And you actually hit it again with a second coat just to make sure the coverage was spot on. So as you can see, I'm a happy boy that day. You know, I brought a nasty frame over in the morning and I am leaving with a beautiful frame later that afternoon. So there it is in the shop among a couple of my other machines at the time. Messy shop as always. That's my MO apparently. But now we've got the motor on the bench and I want to try to repair the stripped out threaded hole for that header. And this was my first time using a helicoil as a repair, and that is what I did, and it made that header mount up nice and tight. At this point I'm getting the old pivot bearings out of the swing arm, which were fighting me because this is next on the chopping block to become powdered. And you can see those plugs there that you put in all the threaded holes. And this is the after product. I'm pleased that it's so clean and nice looking, but it's way too dark. It's not the right color. This is a reproduction skid plate that I bought for the machine at the time from a Canadian guy named Dave, and I can't remember his full name, but if I were to do that again now, I would be buying this from ATD, ATC. They have outstanding products, and that would be my go-to choice for skid plates, grab bars, and a lot of other cool 350X items, among other machines. So at this point, parts and pieces are starting to roll in, and I need to mention that I've now made a new friend, my friend Sean O'Brien. I've been talking to him, and he has voiced that he wanted a 350X, and I told him about this one that I was restoring, and he expressed a lot of interest. So we've crossed over into me building an an OEM restoration to the best of my ability at the time to now a customized machine for Sean O'Brien, my new friend. So you'll see things like these Pro Taper handlebars, the SS rims, other things that are going on this machine. So I've decided to not take it back to OEM. We're going to do a bit of a customized build. At this point, I'm cleaning up that axle. You can see on the right, I've cleaned it up. I haven't done that on the left yet. It's coming together a little bit at a time. Now we're back into roller status. I've got to get that motor in. I've put new old stock fork boots on it. That's an 86 front rim with a Kenda Front Max tire on it. I wish I hadn't put that on it. I would have liked to keep that in my inventory, but oh well, live and learn. It's looking pretty good, sitting nice and tight at this point. I'm really excited to watch it come back together, which is always the funnest part of the build. Sean wanted white 86 style 350X fenders on it, so that's what I got for him. I've recovered that seat, and that's the first seat I ever recovered, and I was pretty pleased with it. From going from zero to being an upholsterer, that came out pretty decent. So with the tank, I took a different tank that I had that was already in primer. I scuffed it up and I reprimed it in this fancy paint booth that I've got hanging under a tree, and came out really good. It was clean on the inside. After the primer had set up, I shot it with rattle can white spray paint. I can't even remember what it was, probably Rust-Oleum white. Wet sanding in between coats. I think I did 3 coats, and then I wet sanded in between coats of the clear, and it came out really good. The key is to get this 2-part clear coat, which is resistant to gas and all the things that we'll be exposed to, and it really makes a nice finish. 1 can will do pretty much 1 gas tank, so get that. It's about 20 bucks a can, and really you can do pretty amazing things with a can of spray paint. So there you go. The motor needed a facelift. It didn't smoke, it didn't tick, it sounded good. So some of you might cringe at what I do here, but this was me taking this over to clean it up. Then I brought it back. Once it had dried off, I wiped this thing down thoroughly with acetone, steel wool. I got in all the nooks and crannies. I was trying to give all the existing paint a bit of a tooth so that fresh self-etching primer would stick to it before I went over it with some fresh spray paint. I taped off everything I needed to, and the plan was that once it was all painted and back in the bike, I would pull out each individual bolt out of the case covers and whatnot, polish them up, and put them back in so that it didn't look like I just rattle canned a motor, which is basically what I did. So I didn't want to look like that, you know, I'm not a heathen. But that was the process I went through on the motor. I should mention that I bought this machine in roughly March, and here we are at the end of June, maybe sometime in July 2017. So I've taken some sandpaper, sanded off the fins to make it look OEM, because that's what we're after, of course. The gas tank, this is in between wet sanding, so I'm doing the clear coat at this point. I'm very pleased with how everything's going together. Tank looks good on the bike. I like the rims, you know, they're good for a custom machine. It's not good for a quote-unquote restoration, but that isn't the goal with this machine. You know, it's going to have Maier fenders. Maiers are great fenders, but not for a restoration, in my opinion. Motor's back in the frame, looking really good. I didn't nick the frame. I taped off everything before I put the frame in there, before I put the motor in there. Didn't want any scratches or dings. I'm getting the brakes put back on it, bleeding them. At this point, I'm getting ready to put the exhaust manifold back on. I have it lifted up so the copper gaskets can set in there. We put a new DG on it. They're loud, they're cracky. It was better than the exhaust that came on it. He wanted a 6-pack cooler grab bar. I don't personally like them, but that's what he wanted. So we put that on it. Here the tank is on my kitchen counter. We've got some decals in from Scott Sansucci at DDR Slap. Great decal guy to use. After taking extensive measurements, these are the decals on the tank. I wasn't using Windex at the time, so these are all one and done. Just put them on and hope for the best. So they came out really good. My buddy Sean is checking in on, every couple of days just to see how progress is going. He's getting antsy. He wants the machine. We're roughly in August, so I had brought the machine out on the front lawn and put the old fenders and old tank on it just to give him a tease at what the machine looked like and how progress was coming, but I didn't want to give everything away. Okay, Sean, still a little bit of a tease. I'm not going to show you the final thing, but we are getting close. Maybe idling a touch fast. Oh, she's loud. They're going to hear you coming. That's all you get for now, bud. At this point, we're just doing finishing touches. He's planning on coming up, I think, the weekend after that video was made, and I'm just making sure all my I's are dotted and my T's are crossed. I had a good idea to put a little customization on the airbox lid, so you'll see that coming up in a minute. But at this point, I'm getting the tank shrouds on, and I don't remember everything that went on at this point, but it's really starting to come together. Oh, Maier fenders have the back flap molded into it, so a trick that people do is to tape it off, kind of scuff it up with some sandpaper to give it a little bit of a tooth so it sticks, and they paint it a flat black to give the illusion that it is the OEM mud flap. And it really looks, from a distance, really looks like it's the real thing, but it is definitely not. But if you can't find OEM, this is an outstanding solution to that problem. Brought the fenders in the house to put the decals on, to mount the seat, and it came out really nice. Again, I'm not super pleased with how the seat cover looks, but that arching that I always talk about in the pit replica seat cover is minimized, I think. Not so much on this side. It looks worse on this side. But overall, I'm pretty pleased with how the machine turned out. Sean, I think, was expected this afternoon. So these are the final pictures of the machine that I took before Sean showed up. One last little photo shoot down by the lake, my favorite place to take pictures. In the background of this picture is our Caravelle Razor boat that we used to have. Don't ever buy one of those. They are lemons, even brand new. Don't ever buy one. That's all I'm saying. But back to this 350X. I'm pretty happy. Tank looks good. That painted mud flap looks good. Overall, a job well done. Not trying to pat myself on the back. I'm no Mike Pomgren. I'm no Travis Gisclair. I'm not even approaching their category. But I was pleased. And most importantly, I got to talk about my buddy Sean. What did he think? We handcrafted it for Sean O'Brien. I toyed around with the idea of naming my restoration company Prestorations, but it's too stressful. I can't imagine what these other guys go through, but here is Sean and his buddy coming to check out the new 350X, and Sean's smile says it all. He's super pleased. I showed him the airbox lid, and he couldn't have been happier. He took it for a little ride around the field. He was on a tight schedule, so it wasn't long after that ride that he had to load it up and get gone, so I didn't get any actual running video of him on it, unfortunately. But that's the story of how she went from a turd to a nice little machine. And here she is with Sean and his buddy leaving the property. I'm glad I did it, and on to the next. Thanks for watching.